this morning to have on a panel Amina Sukhar from UNDP, Said Mohammed Habanjar from Mahmoud Municipality, and I think I'm right in saying a recent chair of the Association of Municipalities, so a national role as well. Thank you, Said Mohammed. And my colleague Daniel Dalati, who is the manager of CARE's Monitoring, Evaluation and Learning team, soon to morph into program quality, new ideas. And Dan's going to kick us off with a brief presentation on this study. It's a study, not a research in-depth analysis, but hopefully with sufficient interesting findings and recommendations that will prompt our discussion. So thanks, and over to Dan.
Thank you. So I'll try and keep this really quick. I'll stand up just so I can see the PowerPoints over here. So this study started back in 2014. We looked at two areas of Shuf and T5. The study is mostly qualitative. And of course, CARE has, through DFATD programming, we have a program both T5 and Shuf where we do household watch, and we do also community support projects. So the municipal projects, and we've done close to 30 projects in those two areas. So closer to the end of or 2/3 through our programming, we thought we would like to look at the intricacies in these communities. So the main objective of the study was looking at how access to basic services through local provision was affecting social tensions or relationships between Syrians and Lebanese. Next slide, please. So how we did that, of course, it was a qualitative study where we met key informants, local inhabitants, Syrian refugees, local NGOs, international actors. But we looked at four main criteria, or social cohesion indicators. We did this through the social stability working group at UNDP and MOSA. So quickly, it's the support or tolerance of Syrian refugees by Lebanese hosts. And then number two, the degree and level of interactions, reports and perception of security incidents and threats, and the level of support to host and refugee communities, and how host communities and refugees feel about the support that they're getting. Next slide, please. So quickly, of course, just so you probably would anticipate, it's a qualitative study. It's done in two areas of Lebanon, so it's not necessarily representative of all of Lebanon. It was in a certain time frame, and the scope did look at specifics such as religion, politics in a specific area. All the two things we're talking about here: access to basic services and quality. When I say basic services, we can think of things like water, sanitation, health, schooling, anything that at the local level, at the municipal level, they have control over or can support in that provision. Next slide. All right, I'll slow down here. So, with community priority needs, I mean, what's maybe not so surprising, but would deserve taking a closer look at is that for the Lebanese community and the Syrian community, you see the first two main needs are the same: water and electricity. So both, though, the pressure on those two have affected both communities. But as we go down or look into that further, the needs differ a bit. So of course, education for Syrians and healthcare, and that's due to, as we all know, provision and cost. Going further down to rent assistance, legal status, and livelihood opportunities for Syrian refugees. So as you remember a minute ago, I was talking about the four social cohesion indicators that we looked at. So as we were doing our qualitative research, we would look at these four main issues and try to trigger or measure the level of social cohesion or tension between the two communities. So number one would be the support or tolerance of refugees. So I myself have been working on the Syrian response since the beginning, and at the beginning it was when we would go there at the beginning and people were welcoming them into their houses, like, please come in. So we all know that's changed, but concretely, how has that changed? So we worded it this way. We said, despite feelings of sympathy, the majority of the host population are not supportive of the continued existence We see this over all the regions, most of the municipalities, local hosts, local organizations in the villages that we did the study in. Of course, that's due to overstretched resources and services. And then number 3, we'll go into further in a bit, the feeling of that both sides are exploiting the situation. Next slide. Second indicator, degree and level of interactions between hosts and refugees. So, of course, at the beginning, we want to see that there is a certain level of interaction between the two communities. How is that now? Is it the same? Is it better? Is it worse? What's happening? But basically, interactions have been diminishing, and most of the reports that we've seen in the field is that relationships are down to tenants and landlords, or employers and employees. So it's either a work relation or through their house relationship. But in the community, even in communities where Syrian refugees are up to 50% of the community, there's minimum interaction. It's a major thing here. Excuse me. Another thing that we looked at is intermarriage. So in a lot of these areas, there's intermarriage, and we wanted to look at this pattern. And it seems that it has been going down more and more. Security incidents and threat perception. So main finding here, I think, is that even though that there's a diminishing sense of security both for the hosts and the refugees, people would naturally attribute that to the Syrian refugees before even realizing that. So in one of the villages that we were working in, doing this research, there was a criminal act in the village, and then as we were doing the research, people we were interviewing started saying, it's because the Syrian refugees, they're ruining everything. We're talking to municipality members, we're talking to the local hosts, and that's what they're saying. And in a day or two, it turns out that it was one of the hosts, it was the Lebanese that did the crime. So it's about, what we were seeing a pattern here is we were seeing that a lot of this was happening because of, it was kind of a blame, right? So Lebanese feel a certain blame toward the Syrian community, and they want to put a lot of their problems on them. Before last point, I think the Lebanese community also feel that with the diminishing level of funds coming in and assistance, there's fear of Syrians going to negative coping mechanisms. So there's fear of crime, there's fear of a lot of things, and that is at the top of their heads. And every conversation we have, that's what people are talking about. Next slide. So level of support. How do the hosts and refugees feel towards local government and national government? Unfortunately, both feel that the government has weak local institutions, biased security forces, I'll talk about that, and insufficient basic service provision, the core of our study, and lack of response plan. Nothing surprising, but let me talk about biased security forces so we don't say something that's too heavy. So this was hard to ask people. How do you ask a Syrian refugee, what do you think about the army or local armed forces? So we would ask them about if their relatives or friends or anyone they knew had problems with local forces. What happened? How did you react? What do you think about it? And the general trend is that they felt they were being targeted. Again, this is not news. We're all aware of it. But for this study, it's a chance for us to document it. And not only the Lebanese armed forces, but it's the local municipal police that we're more focusing on. Okay, next slide. So recap here. So reasons for the social tension: overstretched resources, lack of economic opportunities, the feeling of exploitation by Syrians in two areas. So the shelter issue and rent, that Syrians feel that Lebanese are exploiting them for rent. Livelihoods where local businesses are getting cheap labor. So of course everyone's blaming Syrians for stealing jobs. Personal conflicts over rent and employment issues, unbalanced humanitarian assistance, and security tensions arising from national security incidents. So this was at a time where there are sad incidents were happening, and of course the social tensions would be heightened when anything within Syria or within Lebanon is happening. Next slide. So I think this is the main slide I would focus on here. It's probably the message we would want you to go home with. It's, well, what does all this have in common? So what we think is about perceptions. Perceptions of the local hosts and the Syrian refugees, and the perceptions that they have of each other. We see that few of the host communities who realize or are aware of what the Syrians are going through. And I think what I was saying about the issue of blame, this plays in here as well. A few things about perception. Perceptions directly influence experiences. And I think maybe that's one of the key issues that we can work on is perceptions. Next slide. So tensions between the Lebanese host community and the Syrian refugees do not arise from actual incidents only, but are mainly manifestations of negative perceptions that individuals or both groups have of each other. Next slide. So recommendations. Of course, access to basic service and livelihoods. Strengthen basic service provision. Do more labor market programs. Increase municipalities' capacity. Mainstreaming the above points for both Syrian and host communities. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, previous slide. Sorry. So, recommendations again on protection and conflict prevention. So, of course, how do we increase social interaction opportunities between host and Syrian communities? I think we thought about this a lot at the beginning of the crisis, and we're not thinking a lot about it now. How do we mainstream more protection of the vulnerable communities against harassment, maybe of the poverty-stricken societies or communities in Lebanon? And then I assume that we should be doing more advocacy and social awareness campaigns. A few of us, even through local NGOs, through the local media, are doing awareness campaigns. We have a lot of experience, we have a lot of stories, we have a lot we can do. We can do that through the local media, through local campaigns. And reading off here, number 4, reinforcing the capacity of local institutions and law enforcement agencies. So what trainings do they need? Humanitarian law, protection issues, refugee rights. Mainstreaming of accountability. So I'm biased because I work through monitoring evaluation, and I think we all can improve the way we talk to our beneficiaries, including them in our program design, telling them about what we've achieved. And I think we can all improve in doing that. Okay. And then last point, a more focused analysis on underlying gender-specific dynamics. So one of the shortcomings of the study is that we didn't look at specific gender issues. How do we go, Tom? Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. A lot to take in a short period, but hopefully concise and clear enough for all of us to grasp some of the main findings and recommendations. And please, as I said at the beginning, jot down some notes, and let's open up the conversation after we have the 2 other presentations.